Imagine it's 1989. You've just moved to vibrant New York City, a place buzzing with energy, filled with promise. Life is joyful, your family happy, until one sunny day your daughter vanishes without a trace, leaving behind only memories and unanswered questions. 23 long years pass, marked by grief and endless searching until, unexpectedly, you spot her familiar face on a circus poster in a distant town. Could it really be her? After all these years, what happened to her during all this time? In the warm summer of 1989, the Carson family arrived in bustling New York City, their hearts filled with excitement and anticipation for the life ahead. Robert Carson, a dedicated history teacher, stepped out of their station wagon, smiling softly at his wife, Elizabeth, and their daughter, Emily. The noisy streets echoed with laughter and vibrant music from boomboxes carried by teenagers who glided swiftly along the sidewalks on colorful roller skates. Elizabeth took a deep breath, absorbing the energy of their new neighborhood in Manhattan. She smiled warmly, adjusting her vintage sunglasses and gently squeezing Robert's hand. Elizabeth was the calming force in the family, her soft voice often quoting lines from classical novels she adored. Her nurturing presence comforted Robert, making every new step feel easier. But it was 11-year-old Emily who truly brimmed with excitement, her wide, curious eyes drinking in the dynamic scenes around her. Her most distinguishing feature, a delicate birthmark shaped like a crescent, moon-graced her right cheek, adding charm to her bright, thoughtful face. She immediately loved the city's rhythm and eagerly began picking up small, colorful stones she found along the sidewalk, each one seemingly more fascinating to her than the last. Their new apartment on the Upper West Side was modest but cozy, and it quickly filled with Emily's laughter and Robert's stories about New York's historical wonders. Within days, the Carsons had begun to build a loving, comfortable routine. Robert prepared for his new teaching job, Elizabeth explored nearby libraries, and Emily discovered her favorite spot, the expansive, lively Central Park. Each evening, after dinner, the family strolled together through their bustling neighborhood. Emily's dog, Toby, trotted joyfully beside her, his small brown paws quickening whenever she paused to examine and collect another special stone. Elizabeth and Robert watched their daughter affectionately, often exchanging quiet glances that spoke volumes about their happiness. One bright July afternoon, Robert decided to treat Emily to an ice cream cone from a popular vendor near Central Park. Emily eagerly selected her favorite flavor, strawberry, and they sat under the shade of a large oak tree, savoring their treats and chatting about the magical stories behind the stone she'd found. Her eyes sparkled with wonder as Robert listened patiently, enchanted by her imagination. After finishing her ice cream, Emily asked if she could play a little longer with Toby near a grassy area filled with laughing children and playful dogs. Robert agreed, urging her to stay nearby while he bought a newspaper from a nearby stand. He watched as she happily dashed away, her laughter blending into the cheerful sounds around them. Minutes later, Robert returned to find only Toby barking frantically, circling the spot where Emily had been. A cold dread surged through him as he called her name repeatedly. Panic gripped his chest when she didn't answer. Frantically, he searched among the children and parents around, but Emily was nowhere to be seen. Toby whimpered anxiously, nudging Robert's leg and dropping one of Emily's treasured stones at his feet. Fear paralyzed Robert momentarily before he rushed desperately around the park, shouting Emily's name louder with each step. Elizabeth soon joined him, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. Their desperate calls drew the attention of bystanders who quickly formed an impromptu search party. Within minutes, police arrived, their red and blue lights flashing through the trees, reflecting off the growing crowd's worried faces. Hours passed painfully slow as the police combed through every corner of the park. Each moment without news deepened the sense of hopelessness. Robert paced anxiously, gripping the small stone tightly, while Elizabeth clung to his arm, silently mouthing prayers. Neighbors and even strangers stood close, offering sympathetic glances and comforting words that did little to ease the mounting agony. As evening approached, the search extended beyond the park. Posters bearing Emily's smiling face and unique birthmark soon appeared on every street corner. Volunteers moved tirelessly through the city, driven by empathy and urgency. News crews gathered around, their cameras capturing the heartbreaking pleas of Robert and Elizabeth, hoping their message would bring Emily home. Despite the collective effort, night fell heavily over the city, bringing no answers, only an unbearable silence that filled the Carson home with sorrow. Elizabeth sat quietly in Emily's room, hugging one of her stuffed animals, tears streaming down her face. Robert stood helplessly in the doorway, his heart shattering with every silent sob from his wife. He closed his eyes, gripping the stone he had found beside Toby, silently vowing never to give up. Days turned into weeks with no new leads, and the once happy Carson family became consumed by grief and desperation. Robert found solace only in continuously searching, refusing to accept defeat. Every evening he retraced their steps, haunted by memories of Emily's laughter, her bright eyes, and her precious stones scattered in her bedroom. Elizabeth withdrew into herself, her voice becoming quieter each day. Weighed down by unspeakable sorrow, months passed, and the city's initial sympathy gradually faded, replaced by new headlines and other stories. But for Robert and Elizabeth, every day remained a painful repetition of the last, a constant battle against despair and fading hope. Emily's disappearance became a cruel mystery, an open wound that refused to heal. On the anniversary of Emily's disappearance, Robert returned to Central Park, drawn to the spot where he last saw her. He kneeled, brushing aside fallen leaves and dirt, hoping foolishly to find something he'd missed. His fingers trembled as he uncovered another tiny stone, familiar yet heartbreaking. Robert lifted it gently, recognizing it as another one of Emily's magical stones, lost in the panic of that tragic day. Holding it tightly, tears blurred Robert's vision. He looked up at the sky, whispering a solemn promise into the silent air. "I will never stop looking. Emily, I will never give up until I find you." The fading sunset cast a golden glow over the city, illuminating Robert's determined yet broken expression. As he stood there, gripping the stone, the bustling city around him faded away, leaving only a father's unyielding love, hope, and the relentless promise to bring his daughter back home. By 2012, the vibrant city life that had once brought hope to Robert Carson now felt like a distant memory, hidden behind layers of pain and regret. The bustling Manhattan streets he had once loved became a backdrop to a solitary life marked by melancholy. Now 61 years old, Robert's days were routine and predictable, defined by silence and an endless search for something he feared might be lost forever. His modest apartment was crammed with memories, each item carefully preserved to keep Emily close, as if the cluttered space might somehow bridge the chasm of time. Photographs of Emily's smiling face decorated nearly every wall. Her childhood drawings were framed lovingly and hung in careful arrangements, preserving the innocence of the past. Her bedroom, untouched since the dreadful day in 1989, was a sanctuary of hope, eternally waiting for her return. Robert often found himself lingering there, holding the small stones Emily had treasured, as if they could whisper secrets about her whereabouts. Robert had become a skilled restorer of antique items, working from a small workshop near his home. The meticulous nature of his craft offered brief distraction, though even in the rhythm of his work, thoughts of Emily haunted him. Every old clock, piece of jewelry, or delicate artifact he touched seemed to carry whispers of lost histories, mirroring his own aching past. His obsession with finding Emily never waned. For years, he spent sleepless nights investigating similar cases, children who vanished without explanation, searching for patterns, clues, or connections. Elizabeth, unable to cope with the relentless sorrow, had finally left him years before. The weight of their shared grief had fractured their marriage, leaving a silence neither could break. Elizabeth had moved to Connecticut, remarried, and tried to rebuild her life, but Robert remained, trapped in a loop of sorrow, guilt, and stubborn hope. Occasionally, they spoke, but each conversation ended in awkward silence, burdened by things left unsaid. One rainy evening in early September, Robert packed a small suitcase and set out on a trip north to Maine, commissioned by a client to restore a collection of vintage timepieces. Driving along the quiet highway, the rhythmic patter of rain against the windshield lulled him into quiet reflection. As the skyline of Augusta appeared through the mist, Robert felt strangely drawn to the small city, a feeling he couldn't quite explain. The next morning, Robert wandered through Augusta's quaint downtown, appreciating the historic charm and quiet pace of life. Antique stores, coffee shops, and old brick buildings lined the narrow streets, creating a peaceful yet slightly somber atmosphere that mirrored his mood. He stopped to buy a coffee, feeling the crisp autumn air gently brushing his face as he walked aimlessly, lost in thought. Turning down a side street, something caught his attention, a brightly colored poster pasted haphazardly onto an old brick wall. He paused instinctively, the vibrant colors contrasting sharply against the gray bricks. Approaching slowly, his eyes traced the bold letters, Cirque des Ombres, presenting Madame Lua, the mystical acrobat. A striking photograph of a young woman stared out from the poster. She wore an elaborate costume, her dark eyes intense and mysterious. Robert's breath caught painfully in his chest as his gaze landed on her cheek, a crescent-shaped birthmark exactly like Emily's. For a moment, he felt the world spinning. His heart pounded and his hands shook uncontrollably. He stumbled slightly, reaching out to steady himself against the wall. The noise of passing cars faded, and time seemed suspended as Robert stared deeply into the face of the woman who could be his daughter. Hope, raw and painful, surged through him for the first time in years, accompanied by an equally powerful wave of dread. Could it be Emily, or was this another cruel false lead in his endless search? Quickly regaining his composure, Robert tore the poster carefully from the wall, examining it more closely. The birthmark was undeniable, its distinctive shape etched permanently into his memory. He felt his knees weaken, forcing him to sit on a nearby bench as tears filled his eyes. For the first time since Emily's disappearance, he allowed himself to imagine what it would feel like to see her again, to hold her, to finally heal the wounds that had never closed. But doubt soon gnawed at him again. 23 years had passed. The odds seemed impossible. How could Emily have ended up as a performer in a traveling circus? Yet, the birthmark was too distinct to ignore, and the ache in his heart urged him forward. He felt driven by something powerful and indefinable, a father's love, desperate and unyielding. He returned hurriedly to his hotel, the poster clutched tightly in his hands. Inside the quiet room, he spread it across the bed, studying every detail. Robert's mind raced with scenarios, possibilities, and fears. He needed answers, certainty, closure. Gathering himself, he took out his old notebook filled with years of painstaking research. Flipping through the pages, he jotted down details from the poster, determined to verify this lead. Throughout the evening, Robert made phone calls, searched online, and cross-referenced information about the Cirque des Ombres. The circus had a mysterious reputation, appearing and disappearing in small towns, never staying in one place for long. People described its shows as mesmerizing yet unsettling. Few concrete details were available about the performers, fueling Robert's urgency. Hours passed unnoticed, and the evening turned to night. Exhausted, Robert finally fell asleep, his dreams filled with haunting images of Emily reaching out to him, calling his name from just beyond his grasp. He awoke early, consumed by resolve. Robert knew exactly what he needed to do. He showered quickly, dressed, and checked out of his hotel room, his mind clear and focused. Outside, dawn had broken over Augusta, painting the streets with gentle golden light. He folded the poster carefully, placing it securely into his jacket pocket, as if afraid that losing it might erase this fragile hope. Robert walked briskly to his car. Gripping the steering wheel firmly as determination coursed through him. His heartbeat quickened with every mile driven, adrenaline sharpening his senses. He would find the Cirque des Ombres, confront the mysteries it concealed, and finally learn the truth about Madame Louadat as the highway stretched before him. Robert glanced at the folded poster beside him, his knuckles white with tension. "I will find you, Emily," he whispered fiercely, a promise etched into every fiber of his being. "No matter how long it takes or how far I must travel." He pressed the accelerator, the landscape blurring past him. His heart pounded relentlessly, a single thought dominating his mind. Could this finally be the answer he'd spent decades searching for? Robert knew there was no turning back. His entire life had led to this moment, years of grief, loneliness, and unresolved questions now distilled into one desperate hope. Emily, the daughter he had lost, might be within his reach once more. With the wind rushing past and the poster securely beside him, Robert drove onward, resolved to confront whatever awaited him at the enigmatic Cirque des Ombres. The ghosts of the past whispered at the edges of his consciousness, yet for the first time in years, Robert felt something akin to hope. He was ready to face the darkness, to reclaim what had been taken from him, or to finally find peace in the Keys. Truth. As he drove, the image of Madame Loua's mysterious gaze remained fixed in his mind, guiding him forward. Robert Carson knew his journey was far from over, but now, at least, he had direction, purpose, and renewed determination. He would find her, or spend the rest of his days trying. The road ahead stretched out, uncertain and daunting. But Robert embraced it, knowing that somewhere, somehow, his search would finally end. For better or worse, the Cirque des Ombres held the answers to questions he'd carried for 23 years, and he was ready to face them, whatever they might reveal. Robert drove through winding roads that carried him deeper into rural Maine. Tall pines lined the narrow road, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers, casting eerie shadows in the dim twilight. His heart hammered with anticipation and anxiety, each mile bringing him closer to answers he desperately needed. As he reached the outskirts of the small town where the Cirque des Ombres had set up, Robert noticed the first signs: colorful flags hanging from poles along the roadside, fluttering gently in the evening breeze. Their vivid hues felt strangely out of place against the backdrop of dense forests and shadowy fields. Soon, an enormous striped tent loomed into view, illuminated by strings of dim, golden bulbs that twinkled faintly in the growing darkness. Parking his car, Robert stepped out onto the uneven ground, his feet sinking slightly into the damp grass. The smell of caramel popcorn and sawdust, mixed with something indefinably musty, lingered in the air, tinged with nostalgia and melancholy. He approached slowly, passing small groups of townsfolk gathered at the entrance, their faces illuminated by excitement, oblivious to the secrets lurking behind the brightly painted facade. Inside the tent, Robert felt transported to another time. The interior was bathed in dim, smoky lighting, decorated with heavy velvet drapes and faded posters advertising acts long since past. Mirrors with distorted reflections lined the entranceway, casting unsettling images of visitors as if to remind them of hidden truths. The murmurs of anticipation from the audience felt muted, subdued by the peculiar atmosphere enveloping the circus. Finding a seat near the front, Robert scanned the small circular stage anxiously. A large sign above declared, "Welcome to Cirque des Ombres," the lettering ornate yet weathered. Soon, a hush descended as lights dimmed further, focusing attention on a single spotlight at the center. The ringmaster emerged dramatically, his voice deep and hypnotic as he introduced himself as Dante Moreau. Robert studied him carefully, noting his elegance and confident demeanor. Dante was a man in his late 50s, impeccably dressed in dark colors accented by gold. His hair, silver-streaked, was meticulously combed back, and his piercing gaze seemed to lock onto each audience member, as if seeking out their secrets. Dante announced the evening's spectacle with practiced flair, his words enigmatic, promising illusions and marvels that defied reality itself. Robert felt uneasy under Dante's gaze, as though the man sensed his purpose there. But before Robert could dwell further, Madame Lua was announced, and his heart leapt into his throat. The spotlight illuminated the stage, revealing a slender woman dressed in shimmering fabrics, her dark hair cascading elegantly down her shoulders. Her face was partly obscured by a delicate mask, but even from a distance, Robert could clearly see the familiar crescent-shaped birthmark on her cheek. His breath caught painfully in his chest. This was Emily, he was certain of it. The performance was mesmerizing. Madame Lua moved with extraordinary grace, performing breathtaking acrobatics high above the audience. Each twist, each spin felt impossible, yet effortless. The crowd was entranced, their gasps of awe echoing softly around the tent. Robert felt tears sting his eyes, a mix of pride, pain, and desperation flooding his heart. How had she become this mysterious performer? What had happened to the child he'd lost? After the act ended to thunderous applause, Robert quickly rose from his seat, pushing through the crowd toward the backstage area, driven by an urgent need to speak with Madame Lua. As he reached a heavy velvet curtain separating the audience from the performers, a firm hand grasped his shoulder. "Sir, this area is restricted," a stern voice warned. Robert turned sharply, coming face to face with Dante himself. Dante's eyes narrowed slightly as he scrutinized Robert, recognition flashing briefly in his expression, replaced quickly by cool professionalism. "I must speak with Madame Lua," Robert insisted desperately, his voice trembling with urgency. "It's important. I think she may be someone I've been searching for." Dante smiled smoothly, though his eyes remained cold. "I understand your interest. Madame Lua is quite captivating, but I assure you, she's not available to meet with guests. She prefers her privacy." Robert's frustration surged, and he struggled to remain calm. "Please, I have to talk to her. I believe she might be my daughter." For a moment, something flickered behind Dante's carefully maintained composure. His eyes darkened slightly, and his voice lowered, carrying a note of finality. "Sir, I sympathize with your plight, but Madame Lua's past is private. It's best you leave now." Robert felt anger and helplessness rising within him, but before he could protest further, Dante signaled to a muscular stagehand standing nearby, who firmly guided Robert toward the exit. Outside the tent, Robert paced restlessly, his mind racing. He refused to give up now, not after coming so close. He barely noticed a slender figure approaching until a gentle voice broke through his turmoil. "Excuse me," she said softly. Robert turned quickly, meeting the concerned gaze of a young woman with emerald eyes and blonde hair tied neatly in 2 braids. "My name's Clara. I noticed your confrontation with Dante. You're interested in Madame Lua, aren't you?" Robert hesitated, unsure if he could trust her, but desperation compelled him to speak. "Yes, I believe she's my daughter. I lost her over 20 years ago. She disappeared without a trace." Clara's expression softened, sympathy evident in her eyes. "I've been with the Cirque des Ombres since I was a child," she explained quietly. "I've seen many performers come and go, and I know things that Dante once kept hidden. Madame Lua's story isn't unique. There are others here with mysterious pasts, memories taken, lives rewritten." Robert's heart skipped painfully. "You mean others like her?" Clara nodded solemnly. "Yes, Dante has a talent for finding lost souls, especially children. He reshapes them, gives them new identities. Most of us never question it. We have nowhere else to go. But Madame Lua, she's different. She struggles with fragments of memories that don't align with the story she's been told." Robert stepped closer, urgency coloring his voice. "Can you help me reach her? Can you help me find out if she's my Emily?" Clara hesitated, glancing nervously toward the tent. "It won't be easy. Dante watches her closely, afraid she remembered too much. But I can try. You deserve the truth, and so does she." Robert felt profound gratitude toward this young woman, sensing genuine kindness and bravery in her quiet demeanor. "Thank you, Clara. Anything you can do, I just need to know." She nodded firmly, resolve brightening her eyes. "Meet me here tomorrow night after the final show. I'll arrange for you to speak briefly with Madame Lua, but you must be careful. Dante's power in this circus runs deep, and he won't hesitate to protect his secrets." Robert felt a shiver run down his spine, knowing he was now entangled in something far more complex than he'd anticipated. Yet, he was determined to face whatever came next, driven by the possibility of finally reuniting with his daughter. Before Clara disappeared back into the shadows, she paused, looking over her shoulder with an expression both hopeful and haunted. "Robert, remember, Madame Lua isn't the only one here with secrets buried deep. If you're determined to uncover the truth, be prepared for what you might find." Robert watched her vanish into the darkness, Clara's words echoing ominously in his ears. The weight of unknown truths pressed heavily on his heart, but he felt no hesitation. He had waited decades for this moment, and no threat, no matter how menacing, could deter him now. He stood alone outside the dimly lit circus tent, the night air chilly around him. His thoughts raced wildly, consumed by hope, fear, and determination. Robert knew tomorrow would bring answers he both longed for and dreaded, but he was ready. He had come this far, and he would see it through to the end, whatever the cost. The next evening, as promised, Robert waited anxiously behind the shadowy tent of Cirque des Ombres. The chilly air nipped at his skin, and his heart raced with anticipation. Minutes felt like hours, each passing moment intensifying his sense of urgency. Finally, Clara emerged from the tent, glancing nervously around before quickly guiding Robert to her small, secluded caravan nearby. Inside, the space was cramped but warmly lit by a single, flickering lantern. Books, notes, and photographs cluttered a small wooden table. Clara motioned for Robert to sit, opening a worn leather-bound notebook. "This is where I keep everything I've found," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Robert leaned forward, examining the pages closely. Clara flipped through the notebook slowly, revealing notes meticulously written over many years' dates. towns, and descriptions of performers who had come and gone. Robert's breath quickened as he read entries detailing how Dante had recruited children, some orphaned, others abducted, and systematically erased their memories. Clara explained softly how Dante had convinced these vulnerable children that their past lives were nightmares, fabrications of their imaginations. Over time, they'd accepted new identities, becoming loyal members of his troupe. Anger surged through Robert as he considered the twisted manipulation at play. He clenched his fists, struggling to maintain control. Clara noticed his distress, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I was one of those children," she revealed quietly, her voice trembling. "I have faint memories of a different life, but they're cloudy like dreams. Dante told me I was found abandoned, unwanted. I believed him until I saw how others suffered." Robert looked into her sorrowful eyes, seeing his own reflection of loss and pain. "I'm so sorry," he murmured softly. "How did you begin questioning him?" Clara smiled sadly. "Madame Emily began having nightmares a few months ago. She whispered names in her sleep, mentioned places she'd never seen." Dante became furious. "When I asked about her past, that's when I knew something was terribly wrong." She turned another page, pointing to several photographs and clippings. "These are performers who disappeared or died mysteriously. Dante always explained them away, but I suspect foul play. Anyone who questioned their past or tried to leave." Robert's heart tightened with dread, thinking of Emily trapped in such an environment. He leaned closer, his eyes tracing the faded images, searching desperately for any glimpse of his daughter. Suddenly, loud footsteps echoed outside. Both froze, fear passing swiftly between them. A stern knock rattled the caravan door, followed by Dante's smooth, menacing voice. "Clara, we need to talk, now." Clara signaled for Robert to remain silent, hiding the notebook beneath a stack of papers. She opened the door cautiously, forcing a calm expression. Dante stood silhouetted against the dim lighting, his eyes cold and calculating. "Is everything all right?" she asked innocently. Dante stepped closer, glancing suspiciously into the caravan. "You've been asking too many questions lately. I'd advise caution, Clara. Curiosity can be dangerous." Clara met his gaze defiantly. "I understand. I'll keep my questions to myself." Dante's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Good. I'd hate to lose one of my best performers. Remember, we are a family. Loyalty matters." With that chilling warning, he turned abruptly, disappearing into the night. Clara closed the door quickly, exhaling in relief. Robert emerged from hiding, visibly shaken. "He suspects something," Clara whispered urgently. "We must move quickly." Robert nodded, determination hardening his features. "Is there anywhere Dante might hide more evidence? Something concrete we can use?" Clara considered carefully. "His personal trailer. It's always locked, guarded, but he's away briefly after the final show each night." "Then that's our chance," Robert decided firmly. Hours later, beneath the cover of darkness, Robert and Clara approached Dante's trailer. Robert's heart pounded violently as they crept closer, hiding behind crates and tents. A single guard sat dozing nearby, oblivious to their presence. Carefully, Robert slipped past, Clara closely following. The trailer's door was locked, but Clara swiftly produced a small pin, skillfully picking the lock within seconds. They entered silently, closing the door softly behind them. Inside, the trailer was meticulously tidy, shelves lined with antique books, files, and strange artifacts. Robert immediately searched through drawers while Clara scanned the shelves. Suddenly, she gasped quietly, drawing Robert's attention. Hidden beneath stacks of papers, she discovered a thick, dusty album. Together, they opened it carefully. revealing photographs dating back decades, children, teenagers, all with haunted eyes and uncertain smiles. Beside each photo were dates and towns listed meticulously. Robert flipped the pages hurriedly, his pulse racing. Then he froze, staring at a photograph near the back. It was Emily, unmistakably his daughter, slightly older, perhaps 16, eyes hollow, smile forced. The caption beneath read, "Emma joined, July 1989. Robert's blood ran cold. Emma?" He whispered painfully. He renamed her. Clara squeezed his arm reassuringly. "Look here," she pointed further down. More photos, recent ones, of other performers, some who had mysteriously disappeared. "There are dozens. You're Emily. She might not be Madame Lua. Dante could have moved her, changed her identity again." Robert felt panic and confusion building. Inside him, he'd been so sure Madame Lua was Emily. "Then who is Madame Lua?" Clara shook her head sadly. "Another lost soul like me. Emily could be anywhere. Dante's network is extensive. He hides people by constantly changing their identities and locations." Robert closed the album carefully, holding it tightly, anger boiling beneath his skin. "I'll find her. No matter how far she is, I'll never stop." At that moment, a noise outside startled them. A loud voice, then running footsteps. Dante had returned sooner than expected. Panic surged through them. Clara quickly tucked the album back into place, but the door swung violently open, revealing Dante, furious and formidable. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his eyes blazing dangerously. "You've made a grave mistake, Carson." Robert stood his ground, defiant despite his fear. "I know what you've done, Dante. You won't get away with this." Dante laughed coldly, stepping closer. "You understand nothing. I saved these children, gave them purpose. Their past lives held nothing but pain. You stole their lives." Robert shouted angrily. "You destroyed families." Dante's expression darkened ominously. "Be careful, Robert. I'm warning you, continue this path, and you'll regret it." With a sharp gesture, Dante summoned his guard, forcing Robert and Clara from the trailer. Outside, in the cold night, Robert clutched Clara's arm protectively. "We can't stop now," he insisted urgently. Clara nodded, her determination matching his. "There's a woman, Maria, who escaped years ago. She lives in Vermont now. She might have answers about Emily." Robert gripped Clara's hands gratefully. "Then, we go to Vermont, whatever it takes." Clara hesitated briefly, eyes shadowed by sorrow. "Robert, you need to understand finding Emily might mean accepting things you don't want to hear. Dante's lies run deep." Robert looked fiercely into her eyes, determination overshadowing fear. "No truth can hurt me more than losing her already has." Together, they moved swiftly into the night, unaware of Dante watching coldly from the shadows. Planning his next move carefully, Robert held tightly to hope, fragile yet relentless. The answers were close now, painful as they might be. He had spent years lost in grief and uncertainty, but clarity was finally within reach. In Vermont, Robert knew lay the truth. And no matter how dark or how painful, he would uncover every last secret Dante had buried to find Emily and finally bring her home. Robert drove through the winding Vermont countryside, his heart burdened with a mixture of anxiety and cautious hope. It had been days since he and Clara had narrowly escaped Dante's wrath, and each mile away from the circus brought both relief and deepening uncertainty. Now, the small town of Montpelier stretched out before him, picturesque and calm, nestled amid rolling hills draped in the amber glow of autumn. As he approached the town, memories surged within him like tidal waves, moments he'd shared with Emily years ago, simple yet profound. He vividly remembered her laughter as she skipped along New York sidewalks, the sparkle in her eyes whenever she found a new stone for her treasured collection. Each precious memory twisted painfully inside him, fueling his desperate need for closure. Robert parked in the center of Montpelier, stepping out onto Main Street, breathing deeply to steady himself. It was quaint and inviting, lined with historic brick buildings, bustling cafes, small boutiques, and maple trees shedding their leaves softly onto the sidewalk. Yet beneath the idyllic surface, Robert sensed an undercurrent of suspense. This peaceful town, he prayed, would finally hold the answers he'd searched for tirelessly. Clara had given him an address, scribbled hastily on a piece of paper, a small antique store owned by Maria, the woman who'd once escaped Dante's grasp. Robert hoped fervently that Maria would know something, anything that could lead him to Emily. He walked briskly, heart pounding in his chest, turning the corner onto State Street. Inside Maria's antique shop, soft bell chimes announced his arrival. The store was warm, filled with artifacts whispering stories from countless lifetimes. Maria, a petite woman in her early 50s with gentle eyes and graying hair, appeared from behind a counter, greeting Robert warmly but cautiously. "You must be Robert," Maria began softly, understanding evident in her gaze. Clara called. "Ahead. I've been expecting you." Robert exhaled, relieved at her kindness. "Thank you for seeing me." Maria motioned for him to sit near a small table tucked among shelves brimming with antique clocks and porcelain dolls. "I know why you're here," she began carefully. "I left Dante's Circus 15 years ago. He took me as a child, stole my memories, reshaped my past, but I got out. It took years to piece my life back together." Robert leaned forward anxiously. "I'm looking for Emily, my daughter. She disappeared in 1989. We believe Dante took her. She'd be about 34 now." Maria's eyes flickered with recognition, and she reached beneath the table, retrieving a worn photograph. Robert's hands trembled as he took it, recognizing a young Emily immediately, older than when he'd last seen her, but unmistakably his child. His throat tightened with overwhelming emotion. "Emily went by Emma at the circus," Maria explained gently. "She was different, resilient, but deeply haunted. Eventually, she challenged Dante, questioned her past. He couldn't control her. So he sent her away." "Sent her away?" Robert repeated fearfully. Maria nodded gravely. "He sent her to another circus. Then she vanished again. I thought she was lost forever, but last year, a friend saw someone resembling her here in Montpelier. Her name's Elena now. She runs a small antique store like me. She lives quietly, completely unaware of her true identity." Robert's pulse quickened. "You mean she's here right now?" Maria gave a small, reassuring smile. "Yes, Elena's shop is nearby, Willow Antiques. But Robert, be careful. Imagine the shock she experiences if you rush this. Her memories are buried deeply. You must tread lightly." Robert stood slowly, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Thank you, Maria. You've given me hope." Outside, Robert walked the short distance to Willow Antiques, memories flooding him again. He remembered Emily's 10th birthday, her joy at receiving a beautifully carved jewelry box he'd found at an antique shop. He vividly recalled her squeal of delight, how she'd carefully placed her treasured stones inside it, her smile radiant. Each step now felt surreal, knowing his daughter was so close. He paused outside the store window, heart aching with anticipation. Inside, a slender woman rearranged displays with gentle care. Even through the glass, Robert instantly recognized Emily, the shape of her face, the familiar way she tucked her dark hair behind her ear. the birthmark subtly concealed by makeup yet faintly visible. Robert's chest tightened painfully. Years of searching had brought him here, to this quiet moment on a peaceful Montpelier street, where Emily now lived as Elena, utterly unaware of her true past. Questions raced through his mind: how to approach her, what to say, how she might react. Anxiety paralyzed him momentarily. He couldn't risk driving her away again. Drawing deep, steadying breaths, he stepped inside. The delicate chime echoed softly, drawing her attention immediately. Elena turned toward him, her expression warm yet curious. "Welcome," she greeted gently, her voice soft yet confident. "Feel free to browse. Let me know if you need help." Robert felt his heart nearly burst with emotion, yet he masked it, offering a small, polite smile. "Thank you." He wandered slowly around the shop, feigning casual interest in various items: vintage watches, porcelain figurines, delicate glassware. Occasionally, he glanced discreetly at Elena, heart racing. Each time, her presence filled him with equal parts joy and sadness. Years lost, memories stolen, lives forever changed. Eventually, Elena approached him, eyes kind and curious. "Are you looking for anything special?" she asked gently. Robert hesitated briefly, then chose his words carefully. "Something that speaks to memories, maybe. Something meaningful." Elena smiled softly, thoughtful. "Everything here carries a story. Antiques hold memories, even if forgotten. Maybe something will speak to you." Robert studied her closely, aching to reveal the truth immediately but held back. "How long have you lived in Montpelier?" he asked gently. Elena's eyes drifted briefly, a shadow of uncertainty crossing her face. "About 5 years now. Before that, well, life was complicated. I traveled often, never staying in one place long. Montpelier finally feels like home." Robert's heart broke silently, imagining her fragmented past, the endless cycle of Dante's manipulations. "Home," he repeated quietly. "That's important." "Yes," Elena agreed softly, eyes reflective. "For a long time, I didn't understand the concept. But being here, surrounded by history and memories, even if they aren't my own, brings peace." Robert nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his hidden knowledge. He yearned to embrace her, reveal everything, reclaim lost years. Yet Maria's words echoed strongly: patience, caution, understanding. Instead, he selected a small, intricately carved wooden box from a nearby shelf, similar to Emily's cherished childhood gift. He held it gently, heart filled with poignant memories. Elena noticed his quiet fascination. "You seem drawn to that," she noted warmly. "It reminds me of someone special," Robert murmured softly. Eyes misting slightly, Elena regarded him gently, sensing the depth behind his quiet words. "I understand," she whispered kindly. "Some objects hold extraordinary meaning." Robert looked deeply into her eyes, the familiar warmth he remembered so clearly still there. "Yes, they do." After paying, Robert lingered briefly near the door, hesitant to leave. "Thank you, Elena," he said finally, his voice tender, emotion subtly woven through his words. "You're welcome," she responded gently, her gaze thoughtful yet uncertain. Outside, Robert exhaled shakily, overwhelmed by emotions. His daughter was here safe, alive, yet unaware of who she truly was. Pain mingled deeply with hope, filling him with an urgency tempered by caution. He would stay in Montpelier, watch over Elena carefully, and gradually, gently, reconnect with the child he'd lost long ago. He understood now that revealing the truth required patience and compassion. He couldn't risk losing her again. Resolutely, he glanced back through the shop window. Elena moved quietly inside, unaware of her father's watchful gaze. Taking a steadying breath, Robert silently promised her and himself he would patiently restore the bond between them, piece by fragile piece. With hope burning fiercely in his chest, Robert walked slowly away, prepared for whatever challenges awaited him, knowing his journey was far from finished, but finally heading toward healing. In the weeks that followed, Robert became a regular visitor at Willow Antiques, gradually building a careful yet genuine friendship with Elena. Each day he entered her shop, his heart raced with quiet anticipation. He maintained his careful facade, never rushing, always patient. He knew Elena needed time to feel comfortable, time to trust, and perhaps even time to remember. Their conversations slowly deepened. Elena began looking forward to Robert's visits, often greeting him warmly, her smile genuine, eyes brightening with recognition. Robert treasured these small interactions, each gentle conversation a careful step toward healing the wounds inflicted by years of separation. One afternoon, as golden autumn leaves drifted gently past the shop's windows, Robert and Elena sat together near a cozy corner, cups of steaming tea nestled in their hands. The shop felt peaceful, a haven from the world outside. Robert found himself quietly reminiscing aloud, sharing carefully selected stories from his past, always leaving subtle openings for Elena's dormant memories to surface. "Did you always love antiques?" Elena asked softly, curiosity coloring her voice. Robert smiled warmly. "They've always reminded me of the precious things we keep from our past, pieces of our lives we hold onto, even when everything else changes." Elena watched him thoughtfully, her gaze gentle and searching. "You speak as if you've lost something deeply important." Robert hesitated slightly, his voice careful yet truthful. "Yes, I lost someone long ago, someone irreplaceable." Elena's expression softened in empathy. "I'm sorry," she whispered, sincerity filling her eyes. "Loss is something I understand too well, even if I can't fully remember what I've lost." Robert's heart tightened, longing to reveal everything, yet knowing patience was crucial. "Maybe one day you'll remember clearly," he said quietly, offering gentle reassurance. Days turned into weeks, and their bond deepened steadily. Robert watched Elena carefully, noting subtle changes, a thoughtful frown here, a distant expression there. Occasionally, she spoke of dreams, fragments of memories that surfaced briefly before fading again. Robert listened attentively, hopeful yet cautious. One chilly afternoon, Robert decided it was time to gently move forward. He entered Willow Antiques with a small velvet pouch concealed in his pocket, heart heavy with anticipation. Elena welcomed him warmly, her eyes sparkling with familiarity. "I brought something to show you," Robert said gently, his voice calm yet carrying hidden emotion. Elena watched curiously as Robert carefully removed the velvet pouch, placing it delicately upon the small table between them. He slowly opened it, revealing the small, colorful stones Emily had cherished as a child. Each stone sparkled subtly, catching the dim afternoon sunlight filtering through the antique shop's window. Elena leaned closer, eyes captivated by the stones. Something stirred deep within her, evident in the subtle tightening of her shoulders, the gentle tremor in her fingertips as she reached hesitantly toward the stones. "These are beautiful," she murmured softly, a faint, puzzled smile crossing her lips. Robert shows Elena a pouch of colorful stones, explaining that each one carried a special meaning for someone he loved, courage, hope, and comfort. As she holds the stones, Elena feels an uncanny familiarity and growing emotion she can't explain. Robert gently reveals that the stones belong to his long-lost daughter, Emily. The revelation triggers fragmented memories in Elena, flashes of childhood, laughter, and lullabies, bringing tears to her eyes. Sensing a deep connection, she asks Robert to help her remember, and he promises to guide her patiently as they begin to rediscover her true past together.